Welcome to the daily cyber briefing for Friday, the 2nd of June. I'm Stephen Ridgway. MoveIt file transfer solution application is under attack at the moment. Relatively recent vulnerability, or recently discovered vulnerability, hasn't got a CVE number yet. But it is a severe SQL injection vulnerability that can end up leading to escalated privileges, unauthorized access, all sorts of various things. So basically, MoveIt is a reasonably popular file transfer solution. You run it within your own environments. It's generally considered to be as good as anything else that's out there, and it's fairly popular. Though from the external facing perspective, there aren't that many. If a couple of thousand, 2 or 3,000 systems that have been identified on the internet. However, the vulnerability, of course, exists even if you're running this within your own environment, although it just changes the threat landscape somewhat. So basically, the vulnerability allows for manipulation of the backend database. The backend database can be various things: MySQL, Microsoft SQL Server, Azure SQL. It's possible to execute SQL statements and alter or delete database elements within that, which then basically gives the attacker the ability to deploy the attack itself ends up deploying a web shell with a file named human2.aspx in the root directory of the web server. It is then used to exfiltrate data and so on. I mean, basically, you've had it at that point. MoveIt are aware of this issue. However, there's currently no patch. Presumably, they're working on that at the moment. Have a look. The article that we'll link to, or will link to this podcast, will give you some indications of some IOCs to look for. However, it is at the moment, I believe the recommended action is turn off HTTP and HTTPS for MoveIt, which, yes, I appreciate, will basically, that's turning it off. I mean, would be equally useful. If you shut down its web interface, you can't really use it. I think the HTTPS interface would so switching off HTTPS would also prevent the API from working, I believe, although I haven't got one to test. So yeah, turn it off or disconnect it from the internet or whatever, because at the moment it's vulnerable. I think we can be confident that there will be a patch coming out relatively quickly, but this is now actively being exploited. So something to be concerned about if you use MoveIt. On other matters, there is a previously undocumented APT group targeting iOS devices. Okay, so yeah, all right. More of the same. We know mobile devices. Yeah, they do get targeted. iOS, I think it's fair to say iOS is harder to target than Android, mainly because I think there are so many different versions of Android. Keeping on top of everything is quite hard. But Apple do their best with to maintain security on iPhones from what we can see. However, it looks like this particular exploit is a zero-click exploit that's delivered via an iMessage. The malware then runs with root privileges, gains complete control over the device, and the device and the data on that device. It's been identified by Kaspersky, so unsurprisingly, they are aware of it in Russia. The fact that this particular this particular piece of malware exists probably means that it's elsewhere too. Kaspersky is Russian, so identifying most of the infections in Russia isn't particularly surprising. That certainly doesn't mean that you should be complacent with this stuff. So after the initial infection, there are a chain of downloads, multi-stage subsequent downloads, additional exploits that effectively give the attacker the ability to do what the hell they like with your iPhone. The attacks have been seen against iOS 15.7. So that's not that up to date. I think 16.3 or 4 or 5 or something is the latest version. So it potentially is attacking other versions. It's just not been identified. Now, one thing that's interesting with this, and one of the reasons why, other than if you run an iPhone, beware, one of the reasons I wanted to bring this to people's attention is that it's actually remarkably difficult to interrogate an iPhone whilst it's running. So the ability to pick up on stuff, I think the approach on iPhones is generally make them hard rather than make stuff accessible for anti-malware solutions to interrogate and check the machine. I think there are arguments either way with that one, but that's how things are at the moment. So once this is on your iPhone, identifying it as malware through interrogating the iPhone is going to be very difficult, if not impossible. You can get certain information from backups. So backups will give you can interrogate backups better than much more than you can interrogate an actual iPhone. You don't get the whole OS, but you get bits of the OS in a backup. But the way that this has been discovered, the way this particular malware and this exploit has been discovered, is actually by looking at network traffic. Now, I think an area which we consistently find under monitored is network traffic. There are sort of 3 domains of information that you need to have visibility on in order to have a really good understanding of the security posture of your environment. Obviously system logs, relevant ones rather than just a whole load of random junk, but relevant system logs with security information in them, information about what's actually going on endpoints. So what processes are firing, what's doing what on an endpoint. And then the third area is network traffic, as in what is talking to what. It is impossible to hide the fact that a compromised device will be talking to stuff. It will be talking to command and control servers, it will be exfiltrating data. There are very clever ways in which that can be obfuscated, but it can't be completely prevented, because if the device is not on the network, then the attacker is not able to execute on their objectives. When I say that, okay, what I mean, yeah, if you're really sophisticated, there are like air gap attacks and things, but that's not quite, that's not in the realms of what we're talking about here. So network monitoring is something that organizations tend to shy away from, but actually isn't anything like as difficult to do as people think it is. Spanning network traffic. Don't try to span all your network traffic. Pick the bits of traffic which actually might be useful for you, but definitely try to get some visibility on what's going on. And that was the way that this was discovered by Kaspersky. They saw network traffic that they thought was unusual, as from what I can tell, and did some research into it and discovered that an unknown APT and a previously undiscovered piece of malware. So that's all from me for today. Hope you've had a good week. Looking forward to the weekend. I will speak to you all again on Monday.